Hey, I'm T.A. Charlie, and welcome to The Road to Concord with Professor Joe Bakanovic. Homeroom is on Rumble. You just go to Rumble and search the channels for The Road to Concord. It's one word. When you find it, you go ahead and you click follow. It might mean you got to set up an account, but it's fast, it's easy, it's free. I did it, you can do it. For those technologically challenged members of the class, you can also catch us on Facebook and YouTube. After the show, it's uploaded to Podbean, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and BitChute. Just look for The Road to Concord. You can go to the blog page, that's theroadtoconcord.com. That's where you'll find all your show notes, study notes, and handouts for the class. The phone is working. If you don't know how to call in, email us and we'll think about it. Finally, you can email a professor at joe@theroadtoconcord.com. He's a little slow, but he'll eventually get around to emailing you back. This show is currently mainly listener-sponsored. If you are interested in advertising your business on the show, please email us. With that said, we ask for your participation on a value-for-value basis. If you find our show of value to you, then you provide an equivalent portion of your labor and treasure through the donate link on the Road to Concord blog page, the show description on Rumble, and in the comments on the other streams. And thank you to all of you who have and will support this show. Joe, where are you, Joe? The show started. Oh well, I guess he didn't want to do the show today. Actually, what happened was just a little bit before the show, about a half an hour before the show, I got a text message from Joe. One of his doggies is having some problems, and he's on an emergency trip to the veterinarian. So if any of you know Chief, he's their older dog. He's the one having some problems. So keep him in your prayers and in your thoughts there. So what we're doing today is we're not going to be talking about hippie fascists today. Sorry. If you were excited about that show, you can come back another time and we'll do that. And I know that this is a Road to Concord show. We don't always do religious stuff on this show, but guess what? We've been talking about we're going to do extra shows here and there in addition to our normal schedule because we've got a pretty packed schedule. Well, that's what I'm going to do today. I was planning on doing this presentation on Friday, but since Joe's not here, you've got Charlie, and we're going to be doing a class on biblical finance again. Now, if you've been with the show for a while, I have done this presentation before, and some of it's going to be repetitive, but I have added a few other things to it. And I just think that this is something that hopefully will help some people and something to just take a look at. And like I said, this is going to be biblically based, but there's going to be some real world takeaways from this as well. So hopefully that'll help you out here. Let's see here. I was just checking something here. So let's go ahead and get started here. Phones are on today. If you do have questions during the presentation, you're free to call in. I just can't screen it. You'll just go straight on the air. So, all right. So here we go. And let me bop down. We'll see how this works today. I might have to bop myself out periodically, depending on the slide. But we're going to be talking about, like I said, biblical finance. So we're going to be looking at how to handle finances kind of with a biblical bent on it. And so at the beginning here, we're going to be talking strictly biblical stuff, and then we'll go into some practical applications here as we go. So here we go. We're going to start right into the scriptures here. This is out of Matthew 6:24 and Luke 16:13 basically repeats the same thing. So I'm not going to read it twice, but I will read it, the first one here. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. So that's just I like this scripture because it kind of shows, you've also got some other scriptures that say, where your treasure is, your heart is also, and those kind of things. So if we put Yahweh first, then He's going to provide for us, and that's kind of the point here. And here we go, putting Yahweh first. This is out of Leviticus 27:30. Every tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or the fruit of the trees, is Yahweh's. It is holy to Yahweh, or set apart to Yahweh. So tithing is still something that's there. Now we're going to go through. I'm basically going to bring you all the scriptures that talk about this idea, and it's going to be up to you on how we actually implement this today, because we no longer have a Levitical priesthood or a temple and things like that. So you're going to have to make some decisions on your own and how you actually apply this in your life. This is from Deuteronomy 14:22. You shall tithe all the yield of your seed that comes from the field year by year, and before Yahweh your God, in the place that he will choose to make his name dwell there. You shall eat the tithe of your grain and of your wine and of your oil and the firstborn of your herd and your flock, that you may learn to fear Yahweh your God always. So it's talking here about, you're going to bring this tithe to the place where Yahweh chooses to dwell. Well, if you look at the New Testament and such, in Paul's writings, he talks about the body of Christ, our congregations, as being the temple now, and also our own bodies are considered the temple. So I'll leave that with you to, again, these are just ideas for you to figure out how you're going to live this, if this is something that you choose to do. And again, Deuteronomy 14:24. And if the way is too long for you, so that you are not able to carry the tithe when Yahweh your God blesses you, because the place is too far from you, which Yahweh your God chooses to set his name there, then you shall turn it into money and bind up the money in your hand and go to the place that Yahweh your God chooses and spend the money for whatever you desire, oxen, sheep, wine, strong drink, whatever your appetite craves. And you shall eat these before Yahweh your God and rejoice, you and your household. So, of course, this is talking about the time where they did actually physically do a pilgrimage, if you will, to the temple in Jerusalem. Or, well, this is actually in Deuteronomy, so this would be the actual tabernacle while they were in the wilderness. But this would apply later on. This is a law that applied later on, where they would go to Jerusalem, to the temple there, and this is how that law was exacted, so that if you couldn't, bring all the sheep, if you were really wealthy and it was a long way, and it wasn't practical for you to, bring your sheep and such that you were going to use for sacrifices, then you turn it into money and buy those when you got there. And again, this is again from Deuteronomy 14:27. And you shall not neglect the Levite who is within your towns, for he has no portion or inheritance with you. At the end of every 3 years, you shall bring out the tithe of your produce in the same year and lay it up within your towns. And the Levite, because he has no portion or inheritance with you, and the sojourner, and the fatherless, and the widow, who are within your towns, shall come and eat and be filled, that Yahweh your God may bless you in all the work of your hands that you shall do. So every 3 years, part of this tithing thing was to bless the Levites in your local towns and the widows and the fatherless. A lot of translations use orphan here in place of fatherless, but if you go to the actual Hebrew, that's really is what is meant there. And this makes sense, because in their culture, if a man were to pass away and he had a wife and children, they would then be, fatherless, and she'd be a widow, and their breadwinner was gone, so it would be a very hard struggle for them, especially if the children were small and couldn't take over the father's duties, to actually keep them going along and being able to provide food and clothing for them. So this is that idea and why they should be provided for. And this here, this is talking about the feasts and festivals of Yahweh and how you're to make offerings during this time. One is from Exodus and one's from Deuteronomy here. Exodus 23:14. 3 times in a year you shall keep a feast to me. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread, which is actually coming up pretty soon here, as I commanded you, and you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Aviv. For in it you came out of Egypt. None shall appear before me empty-handed. In other words, you should be bringing offerings, both money and sacrifices for this festival. Sorry, my allergies are kicking me here. Deuteronomy 16:16. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before Yahweh your God at the place that he will choose. Again, there's that verbiage again. At the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and at the feast of booths. So these are the 3 times that are spoken of both in Exodus and here in Deuteronomy. So it's the feast of unleavened bread, the feast of weeks, which is Shavuot in the Hebrew, or Pentecost, some people call it today, and the feast of booths, which is Sukkot, or the feast of tabernacles. They shall not appear before Yahweh again empty-handed. And then here, I think this may be the last scripture here about tithing. And let me pop myself out of here real quick so I can read this whole thing. There we go. Will a man rob God? Yet you are robbing me. But you say, how have we robbed you? In your tithes and contributions. You are cursed with a curse, for you are robbing me, the whole nation of you. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and thereby put me to the test, says Yahweh of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need. I will rebuke the devourer for you, so that he will not destroy the fruits of your soil or your vine, and the field shall not fail to bear, says Yahweh of hosts, and that all nations will call you blessed, for you will be a land of delight, says Yahweh of hosts. All right. So, all right, I'm going to pop in here just like this for a second, because I want to just talk briefly about this before I go into the more practical applications. Why did I go over all this information? Because, a lot of people, a lot of churches use that last verse there to, get their offering coffers, filled up real good, because, that's how they run their ministries and such, and hey, a church or a ministry or a congregation does need resources to do things. It's like even this show here. We're very grateful for those viewers that do donate to this, because Joe's told you over and over again, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those donations, because we have fees that are associated with, how we actually put this broadcast out. We've got fees that Rumble charges us, and StreamYard, the software that we use to actually multicast this to all the platforms. And of course, our internet and other things that we utilize here, the phones and all that stuff, costs money. But that's the point here. And I brought all those scriptures to you so that you can get an idea of what Yahweh wants you to do. Again, we live under the renewed covenant. We no longer have a Levitical priesthood. So we live under what is referred to in the New Testament as a Melchizedek priesthood. And so this is I'm just going to share with you the way we do it in my household. And you can, pray about this and review these scriptures again and see what your heart would bring you to do and keeping with this. But I will tell you this, that if you are faithful in putting Yahweh first this way, he will bless you. I mean, me and my family, we've been blessed tremendously. Even when we were in the Mormon church, it's like, what? Yeah, because we didn't know any better. We thought we were serving Yahweh, but we weren't. Not exactly. We were in some ways, but not totally. But we were faithful in putting Yahweh first, and He will acknowledge that, and He'll bless you. But the way we do it is because we do have a local congregation here. We donate to our local congregation because that's where we're being fed, if you will, spiritually. Um, there is also a widow that we help out, and there's some things that we do in that regard, and there's other charities that we contribute to. Um, so that's how we kind of put it all together and do that. And a lot of this is agriculturally based. You'll see that it talks about the fruit of the land and things, and most of us are not farmers. So just look at your income is that, and 10%. That's what a tithe is. It's 10% of your income. Set that aside to Yahweh. And if you can't do that immediately, if you're having, money problems, do what you can. And as you do so, I believe Yahweh will bless you. All right. So anyway, let's get into some more practical things here. Let me get the slideshow back up here. You'll probably, if you've been with the show, like I said, this is going to look familiar to you. This is what I went over last time as we went through these things. And we're going to go through these. Some of these I'll go maybe a little bit faster than I did even before, but I will stop at some crucial points here that I think people will, it'll be helpful to people that maybe even struggling with finance. So we're going to start with just some budget basics. Then we're going to talk about banishing debt. If you got that problem, we're going to have a serious conversation there. And then talk about starting how to save, and then future planning. So here we go. Budget basics: live on less than you earn. That is the key takeaway here. If you're struggling with debt and things like that, the first thing you need to do is you need to sit down and figure out how much income you have and what your bills are, and see what the difference is there. If you're spending more than you're earning, you have a serious problem, and you got to take some serious actions, and we'll talk about that when we get there. Now, if you've got a little bit of surplus, then okay, what are we going to do with that? And those kind of decisions. So that's what we're looking at here. And here again is a supporting scripture here. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. So this is just kind of looking at finances from that perspective. It's kind of foolish to go out there and start a project and not have enough funds to finish it, and you do look foolish at the end if you do that kind of thing. So this is even kind of more like a proverb here, and you'll see a lot of proverbs as we go through here, because this is just words of wisdom to help you with these things. And now we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of budgeting. Yeah, this is boring stuff. This is not fun, but it's a necessity if you want to be successful. And this is what we're going to do. First, we're going to identify all income sources and identify all expenses. And especially you want to remember irregular bills, because those can sometimes throw you off. And then evaluate your needs versus your wants. And that's an important step. Probably the most important step. In 1 Timothy 5:8, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So this is showing part of our responsibility, especially if you're a head of a household, your responsibility to yourself and to the members of your household, especially, that it's part of your responsibility to be wise with your finances. All right. Identifying income. this probably isn't too difficult for most people. Uh, if you've got a regular job, your regular employment, you know what your paycheck is usually. And, if you're an hourly worker, it might vary a little bit here and there. If you're on a salary, then it's a little bit easier because it's more consistent. If you've got child support or alimony or something like that, that's an income. Tax returns, yeah, if you get a tax return, that's a form of income. But if you're getting a big tax return, you might want to reevaluate your withholdings because you're given a free loan to the government for a year. Don't do that. Uh, you should be getting a small amount back or even paying just a little bit each year if you can adjust it that way. Inheritance, sometimes things happen and you have a wealthy relative that did well financially, and you may have some income that way. Social Security, uh, if you're at that age or are disabled. Pensions, again, this is more towards a retirement side. Annuities, ooh, yeah, those can be good, but usually are not so good. But that's another story for another. And investments and other income. And you have a little bit of control over this to a certain extent, especially like if I'm talking to people that are having troubles financially. This is one area that, you can always take on an additional job, or if you've got other talents that you can uh, do, making things and selling them, or doing some kind of service, to others, on the side, a side gig and stuff like that to help bring in additional income to cover some of those shortfalls that you might have, or to help you to extinguish debt. All right, we got a couple of scriptures here. 2 Corinthians 9:7. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So, when we were talking about this tithing stuff and things like that, that's the attitude that we need to have as we're doing this. It should be something cheerful, because if we do it begrudgingly, then uh, I don't think we'll get quite the blessing that we're looking for, because Yahweh looks at our heart first. He doesn't really need your money. He's looking for your faithfulness. And Proverbs 3:9, honor Yahweh with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. And so that again talks about the agricultural thing, but see how that applies in your life today. All right, and I'm going to bop myself out here so we can see this entire slide. This is another thing that probably isn't too difficult to do, and this is identifying recurring expenses. And these are things like, again, tithing is something that you might want to put in there. An emergency fund. This is important. Uh, and I have here, pay yourself first. That's something that you really should be considering as you're looking at your budget, is setting aside money for an emergency. Um, Statistics show that many people can't handle an emergency of $400 or $500 in their life. It would just devastate them financially. Are you in that position? If you are, then you need to start looking at what you can do to set aside money for that. And that's the same thing, like we're going to talk next about, irregular expenses. Those things can throw you off track. And that's part of what you can use the emergency fund is set aside, hey, I know I've got, car registration, things like that and whatever, and put all those together and at least estimates of how much they are. So you know how much of that emergency fund or irregular bill fund you need to kind of resolve those things when they come along. And then of course, utilities, electricity, water, sewer, all those things that are needed for your home, depending on what your situation is. Food, of course, we got to have food. Vehicle loan. That's something that, if you need regular transportation and you can't afford to buy a car outright, then you got to have a vehicle loan there. Life insurance, vehicle insurance, medical and dental insurance, credit cards. Yeah, those ones. Credit cards should be used only for a payment system. only for a payment system. You should pay that bill off every month when it comes. And student loans, another one that is very, very evil. If you can avoid student loans for you or your children, avoid them, because student loans is one that's protected by law, unfortunately. The only way you can get out of a student loan debt is to die. That's it. I mean, they are, you can't even get out of those in bankruptcy. They're horrible. So if you can avoid student loans, avoid them. And all right, so let's see here. And again, here's irregular ones. Sorry, the slide's a little messed up and I didn't have time to fix it before the show today because I just put this together and didn't have a chance to check it very well before we started. No, we've got a note here from Natasha here. So student loans don't get passed down to the family. As best I understand, no, they do not. They will go away upon your death, but they won't go away before that. So yeah, that's why they're a horrible debt instrument as far as the way they're handled, as far as the law and things like that, bankruptcy law and all those kind of things. And like I was saying, here's the irregular payments. And like I said, these are things that, occur like once a year or just periodically, and they're not, regular. They're not always the same and things like that. And taxes is one. So, you might have to pay, like I said, you should be paying just a little bit, maybe at the end of the year for your taxes. And this is both, taxes on your income taxes and also home taxes if you own a home, especially if you own it free and clear. You've got to plan for those taxes that come around every year. Vehicle registration, clothing, fuel for your vehicle, hygiene and cleaning supplies, kitchen supplies, just a sundry list, and you can put this together for yourself. And these are just some ideas here, but you want to kind of figure out how much these are going to be and kind of figure out, well, okay, how much do I need to set aside each month in my emergency fund, my regular expense fund, to cover these expenses when they do come up so that they don't derail your budget. All right, needs versus wants. This is where the rubber meets the road here, because you've got to, especially if you're having challenges with your finances, this is where you need to really sit down and make the hard decisions. Because what do you really need versus what do you just, what's kind of just nice to have, but you could do away with it. You could reduce it or get rid of it if you actually had to. So of course you got to eat. So you got to have food. You got to put clothes on because, society doesn't like it if you walk around naked. So, and you probably wouldn't like it either, especially at this time of year when it's still cold out. And shelter, you got to have a place to live. Well, at least you should. If you're homeless and you choose to do that, that's another story. But I hope you at least have a nice place to live. But beyond these basics, what are really needs? Well, here's where, it gets a little more gray, but there's reasons for some of these, like transportation. We talked about that before. Transportation for employment. That might be just a city bus pass if you live in a city and you need to get back and forth to work. Maybe you could do that, or a bicycle. Or if you have further to go and you couldn't do that very well on a bicycle, then maybe you do need a car or something. And now they got e-bikes and all sorts of other things now that kind of bridge those things. If you're, short on money and stuff, those are some things to consider. But that can be a need, because if you can't get back and forth to work, then that affects your income and affects your budget. Health and life insurance. Again, if you're not healthy, you can't work and yada, yada. So you should have some kind of health insurance and life insurance. Of course, if you're the primary breadwinner and you've got a spouse and especially if you have children, you need life insurance for the replacement of your income. That's the purpose of life insurance, is to replace that income when the breadwinner is gone. Remember when we were talking about a widow back in the day, because her husband died, and so the breadwinner was not there to work and bring in the money to provide for them. That's what life insurance does, is it replaces that income so that they're not left destitute. Vehicle registration insurance, that kind of goes with the transportation we talked about. Cell phone, yeah, you might need a phone if your job's got to get hold of you and things like that. And so that's could be considered a necessity. And so again, if you're having problems with your finances, this is where, can you make cuts or adjustments if necessary? This is where you kind of make those decisions. All right, so we're going to take a break now. And one comment on the board before we leave. Jenny Thomas says, stop or limit eating out and cook at home can save a lot in your budget. Also pack a lunch to take to work. Yes, those are one of the things that can help you quite a bit, especially eating out. Oh boy, have you looked at how much it costs to eat out nowadays? As they've increased the wage of workers and such, the cost of eating out has just went up tremendously. So yeah, that can save you a lot of money now. All right, so Natasha, take us to a break and we'll be back in 3 minutes. All right, welcome back. And now we're going to talk in a bit more detail about banishing debt. And we're going to talk about the debt avalanche here as part of this. And this is where, again, I'm going to be talking to people that maybe having some difficulties with their finances and gonna have to make some hard choices here. Um, again, a scripture to open us up here, Hebrews 12:11. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So the reason I put this one in here is this is going to be hard. This is not easy, especially if you're drowning in debt. And you got to make some hard choices, and it may take a while. It's going to take some persistence and dedication to take care of this. So, first, we're going to talk about debt. What is debt? It's when you owe somebody money. And usually, when you owe somebody money, they don't just lend you money and say, oh, pay it back whenever you want. You have to pay it back within a certain time frame. And of course, for the privilege of doing this, they're going to charge you interest. So you're going to have to pay back more than you borrowed. And there's a few different types of debt here, and there's reasons for these and such, and why some are better than others and some are more dangerous than others, and things like that. First is secured debt. What a secured debt means is that you put up collateral. In other words, something of value that if you do not pay back this loan, they can come and take it away from you to be basically paid back for what you owed them. And this would be things like your home, a mortgage. So if you default on your mortgage, they're going to repossess your home, and then you're going to lose your place to live. Same thing with a vehicle. So those are things that can happen. Not a good thing. So those ones usually have better interest terms because there's less of a risk to the lender, but the risk is higher, to you if you default on the loan, because you will lose that asset in the process of default. Unsecured debt. This is where they just loan you money on your good name, basically, is the way it works. Again, we talked about student loans and how evil they are. In my book, you do not want to take out student loans. That is the last thing that you want to do. And if you do take out a student loan, the guidance that and I'm using some the resources that I'm using here from Clark Howard. He's a consumer advocate and financial guy. He recommends that you do not take out more than what your first year of salary your expected salary is after you complete your program. So that kind of keep those limits on it. And credit cards, we've talked about those. Credit cards should only be used as a payment system. You should not be carrying a balance. You should be paying those off every month. Personal loans, these would be like just signature loans for whatever purpose. Again, they're going to carry a higher interest rate because they're secured just by your signature. And medical debt. Now, medical debt is handled a bit differently now. There are some laws that have given a little bit of relief for this. Because in the medical area of debt, a lot of times the debt that you receive, the bill that you receive is incorrect. And Congress and such has actually recently have changed some of the way that the creditors deal with this. And so you've got a little bit more time sometimes to resolve medical debt than you do with other debts because of the billing issues and such, because we're no longer the customers in this arena. The insurance companies are, and they don't always get things right, especially hospitals. So one of the things when you're handling medical debt is make sure it's a valid debt. Make sure that what they are charging you for is correct. If you go to the doctor, then or especially if you go to the hospital, get a detailed bill. They're just going to send you a summary bill. Ask for the detailed bill, because many times if you're in the hospital, they're going to charge you for things that they didn't even do. And you can, go back and say, no, you never even gave me this treatment or this medication or this whatever. And you can work with that. And there's patient advocates or patient social workers that you can work through at most hospitals and even some doctor's offices and things like that that you can talk to help resolve billing issues and such. So don't just take this laying down. Aaron Spike says, you sound like Dave Ramsey. He is one of the people that I pull information from. And if you've ever listened to Dave Ramsey, yeah, he's got some good ideas. I don't agree with everything that he says because he believes that you should not carry any debt whatsoever. I'm not that ardent on this because I believe that there are certain debts that are reasonable as long as you can handle them and manage them well. Like I've got a mortgage. I'm in retirement and I have a mortgage. I have a 30-year mortgage in retirement, but my mortgage rate is 2.675%. I'm earning more in a regular savings account than that. So I'm not in a hurry to pay off my mortgage because I'm using that money to my advantage. It's just, it's the best thing to do when you look at the numbers properly. All right. Oh, Deltro says they also charge more to insurance companies than they do if you pay cash. Actually, no. They actually charge you more if you pay cash, at least upfront. Okay. You got to understand medical billing. The medical industry, the way things have worked with that is they have standard contracts with insurance companies. So they will give discounts to insurance companies for certain procedures. In fact, there'll be limits and such on how much they can charge. Cash, they don't have that. So if you're a cash payer, don't pay what they're charging you. Okay. You can negotiate with them. That's what I'm saying with the patient social worker or patient advocate, because if you are a cash payer, you can ask for discounts and you'll likely get them. Because a lot of times, if you're looking at your bill and you do have insurance, you'll see where they write off certain amounts and stuff. They will charge more. Yeah, in the bills, Deltros is right to a certain degree. They will have a charge on your bill for like $1,000, but the insurance will only pay $200. But they do that. It's part of a tax thing. So they actually write off the $800 as a loss and stuff. It's a tax manipulation thing. But if you're paying cash, then you don't get that discount and such. So yeah, it gets convoluted. But if you're a cash payer, yeah, go and negotiate with them. And many times they'll write off part or sometimes even all of it, depending on, because some hospitals that receive federal funding and stuff because they're a supposed nonprofit hospital have to do a certain amount of, pro bono, if you will, care where they, will write off your entire bill if you don't have the money to pay for it. So engage with them and see what deals you can work out with them. So, yeah. And then fixed debts, those are just ones that have a certain term, where you borrow some money and you got to pay it off within a specified period of time. Usually those are more like a signature loan. And then you've got revolving credit. That's more like a credit card, something that you can continue charging to. And so your balance can go up and down. And, basically you don't ever necessarily pay it off. If you are paying just minimums on a credit card, you will never pay it off. Especially if you're charging more onto it. So that's kind of thing. Fixed loans, those are for a specified period of time. All right. So enough of that, I think. Oh, this one. Now this one, this one's actually a good chart. The power of compounding interest. And this shows what 10% over 20 years does. And this is if you just leave all the money there and let the interest accumulate in the account, and you start here with $1,000 over the period of 20 years, you'll end up with $7,000 at the end, actually more than that, at a interest rate of 10%. So that's great. Great. If you're, trying to save money and put it away, compounding interest is a wonderful thing. The problem is this works in reverse. If you have a credit card debt that, you know, you got $1,000 credit card debt and you're just making the minimum payments on it and it's a 10% interest rate, you see here very quickly that you're never going to pay that thing off because after 20 years, it's going to be over $7,000. So it works in the exact reverse when you're talking about debt. So the more money you can throw at it to get that balance down and so that you're not paying interest on it, the better off you are. So this door swings both ways. So compounding interest when you're being paid the interest is a good thing. If you're paying the interest, it's a horrible thing. And here's just one. This is just a fun one I put in here. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And I forget exactly what interest rate they use on this. I think it's around 6%. I'd have to go back and look at where I pulled this from. But this just shows that if you started at 15 years old and you put $2,000 away each year until you turned 24, basically 25, and you just put $2,000 a year away till you turn age 25, by your 70th birthday, basically you'll be a millionaire. And that's if you put no additional contributions in there. That shows that compounding interest that we were talking about and how it can work in your favor. Time is your friend and interest rates are your friend when you are the one being paid the interest. But when it's a debt, it's the exact opposite. And here's another supporting scripture here, Romans 13:8. Sorry. Owe no one anything except to love each other. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. So basically the scriptures are saying here, Paul's saying, don't owe anybody anything. So this would be a Dave Ramsey quote right here, Deltros. Or was it Deltros or no, it was Aaron that said that. Sorry, I had to get a drink there because I lose my voice. Yeah, because that's Dave Ramsey's thing. He says you should have no debt, owe no one anything. So, all right. Here's a serious slide. For any of you out there that may be drowning in debt, you're like, I don't know where to turn. I am so far into debt. I don't know what to do. I need help. That's the first thing. That is the first thing. You've got to be able to admit to yourself, I've got a problem. This is kind of like an addiction. It's kind of like, gambling or alcohol or drugs or whatever. That can be just like that. It's the first step in resolving this is to admit that you have a problem and then seek help. And the first thing is you've got to do what we've talked about so far. Sit down, figure out that budget, and make sure that you are no longer charging to your credit cards and things like that. And get your budget to where you are earning more than you're paying out. That might mean that you got to take on additional jobs like I talked about and cutting corners wherever you can. Now, there may be a point where you need even more help, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if you're just, on that edge and you're just struggling to, make, minimum payments, but you got a little bit of wiggle room in there, you might be able to handle this on your own. And the first thing you want to do is go out and contact your creditors, talk to them. They did a study recently, and I believe it was 75% of the people that they had in this survey, and it wasn't a big one, it was a small one, so I can't say this is totally accurate, but 75% of the people that called their creditors and asked for a reduced interest rate got it. Now, it may not have been forever. It might have been for a period of time. It might have been for a year or two or whatever. But the point is they actually got some relief on their interest rate. Sometimes they'll even do payment plans with you to help you restructure your debt and things like that. So don't just go hide under a rock. Talk to your creditors. Tell them, hey, I'm having a tough time. Like, for instance, maybe you got laid off from a job. Maybe it's a temporary situation, and you're like, hey, I got laid off and I just can't make my payments right now. Can I get some relief on interest rates? And can we work this out until I can get back on my feet and get another job, and so on. But talk to them. Well, many times they'll work with you. The next thing, if it's to the point where you're like, I can't do this on my own. I'm just drowning and I can't keep my head above water. National Foundation for Credit Counseling. I've got the website up here, nfcc.org. This is a nonprofit organization. They are fiduciary counselors that you can set up a time to talk to them. I've actually helped others use this service before, and they are helpful. They can, in some cases, work with some of your creditors to get you relief. Sometimes they can even help with getting some of your loan balances even reduced and things like that. It depends on your situation, but you're going to have to be prepared to show them, all your income sources, all your, debts and everything, so that they can, help you in the best way they can. What this resource is going to do is going to try to help you avoid the next two things, which is bankruptcy. And there's two different forms of bankruptcy. You've got a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is commonly talked about as debt restructuring. And this is not a complete bankruptcy, but this is where it is a formal process. You'll need lawyers and stuff like that. And basically what happens is they will restructure your debt into a payment plan over a specified period of time. There may be a third party involved that kind of handles your payments to your various creditors. You'll pay them, and then they distribute your payment to your creditors on a pro rata basis that's developed by the bankruptcy determination and such. And usually this is over a specified period of time, 2 to 5 years generally. And at the end of that, hopefully you'll be out of debt and, back on your feet. Then there's the worst one, Chapter 7 bankruptcy. This is a total bankruptcy. This is where, you just can't handle it. And you might be able to sometimes under bankruptcy, if you have a mortgage, you might be able to keep your home. It depends. This is where lawyers get into all their stuff, and you will need lawyers to do this one, but you're put into a 10-year penalty box. Basically, you're not going to be able to get any credit to speak of for the next 10 years. It ruins your credit for 10 years. But I mean, if things are that bad, then that may be the way to go. But this does forgive all your debt basically, and you get a clean slate, but you're in a penalty box for that 10-year period. So it's not fun and games, but there is relief out there if it's really that bad. All right, so what can you do if you think you can handle this on your own, or maybe with a little bit of help? These are two different approaches to what we call a debt avalanche. This is a way to pay off your debts. And there's two different ways of doing this: the lowest balance and the highest interest rate. The lowest balance gives more immediate feedback so if you're somebody that, I need to just see that I'm doing something, it makes me feel better and to see that I'm making progress. If you're that type of individual, that might be the best way to do it. But the most effective one financially is the highest interest rate one. May initially feel like, oh, I'm not getting anywhere. It does look like it's taking longer to you, but it's actually being more effective. And both of these assume that you do not take on any additional debt. You stop charging. These approaches that I'm giving here are not going to work if you do not solve the problem, the underlying problem of spending more than you're earning. So here we go. Lowest balance. What you're going to do is you can take all your loans and everyone that you owe money to, put them all together, and then you're going to pay minimum payments on all your credit cards and loans. except for the one that has the smallest remaining balance. And you're going to throw any extra money that you have against that lowest balance. And then as soon as you pay that one off, you're going to move to the next lowest balance. And you're not going to, if you had a minimum payment and stuff, you're going to continue paying all that plus what the additional is. I saw a comment here and lost my track of thought. We'll put it up here in a second. But then you go on to the next one and you're just going to snowball and put all the money that you were putting against all those previous debts against that next lowest one until all these are eliminated. So you're just it turns into a snowball as we go along. So here we go. Let me post this. This is a note from Joe. Chief, that's his dog, is okay, but is in his last act. At least he's okay, at least for right now. But yeah, he is an older dog, so he's at that time of life where things get difficult for him. So, all right. Now, the next one is, like I said, this one's more efficient. This is basically the same concept as the lowest balance, except you're going to start with the debt with the highest interest rate. So you're attacking the highest interest rate debt, throw all your money against that you can until that one is paid off. And then you go to the next highest rate. And again, you're going to continue throwing all the previous money against it and what you were making as the minimum payment. And you're going to keep doing it. And so that's what you're going to do until all these are eliminated. And let me post this comment up here. This is from Foxy Joe. Credit is an addiction. I've struggled with it to this day. Awesome show topic. Yes, Joe, that's why I'm doing this, because I know what it's like. I've been there too. I've made poor financial decisions in my life before. I've never had to file, bankruptcy. I'm lucky that I haven't gone that far, but I've made some foolish decisions here and there. And that's why I'm doing this, is because I don't want people to struggle with this. I want them to get hold of this and be in a position where you are sound financially. All right. So we've got our debt eliminated. Okay. We've got through that. That may take a while. It may take you several years to do that. It's going to, like I said, it's going to take some persistence and dedication to doing that. But then you want to start saving so that you don't get in that position again. That's what we're going to do here. Start small, keep building. And Proverbs 21:20, precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. In other words, hey, don't use up everything. Use your resources wisely so that you've got some extra there if you need it. And this is just talking about making that savings habit. I recommend that you start by saving just 1%. That's just a penny out of every dollar. Most people can probably find that somewhere in their budget where you can just put that aside and do it automatically. Do it either from payroll deduction, automatic transfers. We've got stuff that makes it fairly easy to do that. Then increase it by 1% every 6 months. And if you do that consistently over a period of, few years, you're going to be saving a good amount. And continue until you have enough to cover at least 6 months of living expenses. And this is your emergency fund. This is in case, like I was talking about earlier, hey, what if you get laid off of your job? What are you going to do? But if you have 6 months of living expenses set aside, no big deal. I just live on my savings until I find another job. And, you're going along and you don't miss a beat. That's where I want you to be. And continue adding, as you get your emergency fund set aside, then add investing to this savings habit. This would be either through retirement plans or an investment account, because generally speaking, if you're investing in stocks and stuff like that, you're going to get a higher return on your money than in traditional savings instruments. And then continue adding to this idea until you simply can't till the pain's too much and you're like, okay, I can't save anymore. I've got to, meet all my other obligations. But something to think about too, and this is something that I did early on as I was, working on saving. When you get a raise at work, don't just put that in your pocket. Take at least half of it and throw it into savings or retirement. At least half of it. If you can do more, sometimes I just take the whole thing and I'm like, we're doing okay. We're meeting our bills. I'm just going to take the whole amount and throw it into savings or retirement. And that will help to build on this so that you have that money for the future. Speaking of the future, that's what we're going to do is we're going to plan for the future. And let's see. Natasha, let's do another 3-minute break here. I've got just a little bit more to do, but we're going to go a little over an hour today. And let's do a 3-minute break, and then we'll come back and finish up. All right, we're back with you here, and these next couple sections should go fairly quickly here, hopefully, and don't want to keep you too long today. But this is where I want you to be. I hope you're already there. But these are the things that I want people to get to because this is where you are kind of secure financially, and you're even preparing yourself for a future retirement and things like that. So planning for the future, leave a legacy. So, can you actually even leave a little bit maybe for your posterity here? Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. So in other words, hey, people that plan well, they, they can pass things on to their posterity and help them out a little bit going along. So Planning for the future, managing and using credit. We're going to talk a little bit about that, um, because that's important. We were talking about the different views, like Dave Ramsey. His view is a little bit different here, because he thinks that you should not have any kind of debt. And I mean, I understand that, especially if you're somebody, we talked about, in Foxy Joe there said something about it earlier about, you know, debt can be an addiction kind of thing. And, that's true. It can be. And, it, how do I, we need to make it a servant for us. But some people, if you're a real alcoholic and stuff, you got to stay away from the stuff for the rest of your life. So if you have that kind of an addiction, if you will, to debt, then maybe Dave Ramsey's right, and you shouldn't have any debt in your life. If you can't handle it, if you can't be disciplined, in doing that kind of thing, then maybe Dave Ramsey is right for you, and you should not, have any. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. We're going to talk briefly about different types of insurance that you might want to have as part of your overall portfolio. Saving for retirement, we'll talk a little bit about that, and investment advice, and buying a home, and estate planning. So that's where we're going here. Again, from Proverbs, like I said, we're going to have a lot of these in here. One who lacks sense gives a pledge and puts up security in the presence of his neighbor. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you understand what this is talking about. This is co-signing for a loan. Don't do it. I don't care what the reasons are. I don't care if it's your spouse or your child. Don't do it. Because when you co-sign for a loan, you take on all the responsibility for that debt, and you get none of the benefit. And if the person that is the one really responsible for the debt is delinquent on that debt, and especially if they don't tell you that they're delinquent, it can put you in serious financial hurt, and could even ultimately force you into bankruptcy if it's bad enough. Don't do it. All right. Did I say that enough? Oh, Foxy Joe here. He says, my dad had a saying that I never adhered to: pay yourself first. Absolutely. That's exactly right. That's what you want to be doing. You want to pay yourself first, and then keep on going from there. Because that's, there's nobody out there that's going to give you a loan to bring you through retirement. And things like that. You've got to take care, and especially now, because Social Security, it's on the ropes. Some of you younger viewers, you may never see Social Security. It may not be there for you. So that's why some of these things I'm going to be talking about in this particular part here are very important to you. So managing and using credit, like I said, I'm not totally against credit, but you've got to make it your servant, not your master. So you got to use it wisely. Why do you need credit? Purchase a vehicle. It's hard to find a vehicle now that you can pay cash for. I mean, it used to be back in my day, when I was first getting a vehicle, I paid cash for my first vehicle, and I only paid like, I think $1,500 for it. I mean, back then it was a little bit more money, but today, to get a reliable vehicle, you're talking probably 10,000 plus to get a decent vehicle, and a lot of people can't handle that up front. So that's something, like I said, if you need that for transportation and stuff, something that might be a reason to have credit. But with a vehicle loan, do not get a vehicle loan longer than 4 years. In fact, if you can do a 3-year loan, do a 3-year loan. That's even better, because technically it's 42 months. I'm saying 48 because usually you can't find a 42-month loan out there. But if you get a loan longer than 4 years, And even if you do a full 4-year loan, you're going to have this problem to a certain extent. You're going to be what's called upside down in your loan for the entire loan. What that means is that you will owe more on the vehicle than it's worth the entire time of the loan. So that if you got in some trouble, you couldn't even sell the vehicle to get out of that debt, and make enough money back on it to pay it off. So that's why you want to keep that term 48 months or less, preferably less. And you want to, if you can, put down a significant down payment. That'll also help that, so you're not upside down in it. To purchase a home, I don't know many people that can go out there and just pay cash for a home. I couldn't. I've got a mortgage. Like I said, I'm in retirement with a mortgage. I did. My previous home was actually paid off. I was so happy when that happened. But when we got this home, I couldn't pay, because we hadn't sold the other house and things like that. And like I said, because of the way finances are and stuff, I'm keeping my loan. I took the money from the sale of the other house and I've got it invested now. And that's what I'm using to, help pay the mortgage. Travel and credit cards. Again, credit cards should only be used as a payment method. And if you can't handle it, don't do it. And be very careful with your debit cards as well. Debit cards are again, they're evil because you don't have the same consumer protections you have with credit cards. There's banking regulations that, and when you have a problem with a debit card, that's real money that's already gone. And you got to fight with your bank or credit union to get it back. Whereas with a credit card, if you have a fraudulent charge or something like that, generally speaking, you can get that resolved fairly easily, and you have consumer protections that will protect you from having to pay those fraudulent fees and things like that. So there is a use for credit cards, but be careful. And then, some people will say, well, Dave Ramsey's right, and I shouldn't have any credit and all that. Well, in our society today, that can cause you problems that you might not have even thought about, because everybody has what's called a credit score, and we'll talk a little bit about that here shortly. But they're now using credit scores to determine whether you are acceptable for employment. Some employers will check your credit score, and if you've got a bad credit score, they won't hire you. Your car and homeowners insurance now, instead of determining your car insurance based on how good of a driver you are, they're basing it on what your credit score is. Same thing with home insurance. So these things are important to you in the society in which we live. Yes, Natasha.
Just quick question. What if you're look in the job market, maybe first time job or something happened, etc., and you just don't have credit built up yet? Like, is
Well,
life going to strike you there?
it depends. If you're in an entry level job, probably not. But if you're in like a career type thing where you're moving up the corporate ladder, so to speak, and you've got a poor credit score, they're going to look very poorly at that, because you're usually in those positions, you're in a position of authority, in a management kind of position, or having management over resources and such. And they look at the credit score is kind of the evaluation of how well you handle your personal finances. If you can't handle your personal finances, I don't want you handling my business resources. You see where I'm going with that? And that's the way to look at it. Now, if you're looking for a job and, an entry level job in retail or, fast food or, entry level kind of things, they're not going to be as critical with that because you're not going to have those type of responsibilities necessarily. But it is something to, and I mean, they even use credit scores like, if you're looking to rent an apartment or something, they're looking at credit scores. And that can exclude you from those things. So a credit score is very important in our society today. And we're going to talk about how to start and get a good credit score and how to keep one. So,
All right. Yeah, that makes more
but
sense.
good question. Thank you. All right. Credit freeze. There's two different things you'll hear about: credit lock and credit freeze. You do not want a credit lock. You want a credit freeze. What's a credit freeze? This is something that Congress has put into place, and it allows you to basically what happens is there's basically three major credit bureaus out there: Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And these credit agencies do not work for you. They work for the banks and businesses that are going to give credit to people. And so what they do is they build a dossier on you based on your previous use of credit, and they sell these lists based on, you know, how they evaluate how well you're doing credit, and they sell these lists to potential creditors, and that's how they make their money. You are basically just data to them. They don't care about you, is what I'm telling you. Now, Congress has passed a law that allows you to freeze your credit. And what that does is that stops them from selling your data. Okay. So when your credit is frozen with the three bureaus, they can no longer sell your dossier to just anybody that's there. Now, if you have credit, the people that have already given you credit can still look at your file and see how well you're doing and such, but nobody can get new credit in your name without you thawing it. So it also protects you against identity theft, where somebody goes out and uses your name to get credit fraudulently. So that's why a credit freeze is good. You want to freeze your credit with all three bureaus. It takes about 5 minutes per bureau, 15 minutes. It doesn't take long, and it doesn't take that long. Now, when you want to go out and, you know, like if you need to buy a car or get another credit card or something, you'll have to go out and temporarily thaw your credit file so the creditor that you're going to try to get the loan or whatever can actually see your file and such, and then it can automatically freeze back. That's the way you want to handle that. And there's information on that if you go to Clark.com and just put in credit freeze. His website there, Clark Howard, like I said, he's got little guides out there that'll show you exactly how to do that, and it's pretty easy. Now, that's what I'm going to give you a little bit more detail. This is about managing and using your credit score. This is how they kind of break things out on how they evaluate your credit worthiness. 35% of your score is your payment history. Have you paid your bills on time and in full? If you have 35%, that's good. That's biggest part of your credit score. Then the next one is, can it be done online? Oh yes. Aaron Spikes was asked, can it be done online? Yes. In fact, you want to do it online, because if you do it offline, oh boy, they want all sorts of stuff. They want your driver's license or a whole bunch of stuff. You want to do it online. Yes. Now be prepared, because if you do have a credit file, they're going to be asking you about your current credit stuff to verify your identity and stuff like that. But yes. So thank you, Aaron. All right. The next thing is the amount owed, and that's 30% of your credit score. And the way they look at this is they look at your available credit and then how much of that available credit you are using. So for instance, you have a credit card and they have given you a line of credit of $10,000. Okay. If you are using just, well, let's say you've got a balance of $5,000 on it. That's not good, because that's 50% of your available credit. If you're above 30% of available credit, it is going to hurt your credit. In fact, you get up to 30%, your credit score is going to just go in the toilet. So you want to keep your available credit and the credit you're using, you want to keep that ratio below 30%, preferably below 10%. If you can get it below 10%, then you're going to have a credit score that's going to be above 760, which is in the excellent credit score, 760 to 780. It goes up to 850 generally in the FICO score. There's a couple different scoring models out there, but that's the generally accepted one. Then the next one is the length of credit history, how long you've had your credit instruments. You do not want to close credit cards especially if they don't have a an annual fee. And I'm talking major credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, those kind of things. Do not get store credit cards that do not have the major logos on them. That's trash credit, basically. So you keep those out there. And even if you have a credit card that you're no longer using, just use it like once or twice a year just to keep it active in your mix. And you should have at least, I'm going to say, 3 credit cards from different issuing agencies. That way, if somebody, one of these creditors decides, oh, I don't like your credit profile anymore, I'm going to cancel your credit card. Because when they do that, that available credit we were talking about goes entirely away, and that can really trash your score. So if something like that happens, you want to leapfrog and get another credit card immediately to replace that so that it keeps your available credit up there. But just keep using them just a couple times a year just to keep them active in your credit mix. And then new credit generally is a negative against your credit score, and that's only 10% of it, and it'll only usually affect your credit for a few months or so to a year. And then your credit mix, that's how many different types of credit you have. Like we talked about the different types, secured loans, mortgage, car loan, revolving credit, things like that. You actually get, it sounds counterintuitive, but you actually get a higher credit score if you have more different types of credit than just having credit cards, which doesn't make sense to me logically, but that's just the way the system works. So that's how your credit score is determined. And here's just a little thing about, and this shows kind of, this little visual here shows what scores are good, what scores are poor, and things like that, and kind of the distribution of typical credit scores of Americans. But we're going to talk about monitoring and checking on your credit. You can always check your credit at once a year. Once a year at annualcreditreport.com. Make sure that exact site, and they're going to, even though you go to these bureaus and they have to give it to you for free, they're going to try to sell you stuff. Just skip all that stuff, and they'll have to give you your credit report for free. Now, they're not going to give you a credit score. They're going to give you your credit report. But by doing that, you can see if there's any incorrect information on your credit report, and you can submit disputes to them. And when you dispute it, be prepared for them to just immediately say, oh, no, it's correct. Remember, you're not their customer. You generally have to dispute it at least twice before they'll actually take action on it and remove it from your credit if it's incorrect. And you may have to provide evidence to it, showing that this isn't a valid debt and so on. You can also monitor your credit. Before you do those freezes that I talked about, you might want to set up an account with Credit Karma or Credit Sesame. These are free services that allow you to go in and look at your credit report anytime. And they do give you at least an idea of what your credit score is. They don't give you your actual FICO score, although many credit cards do give it to you on your statements now. But they will give you their idea of your credit score, and it'll give you an idea of where you're at, and it'll send you periodic updates saying how well you're doing with credit. They do give you offers and such of different places where, that's how they make their money, is they'll offer you different things, different credit cards and things like that, fit the profile of people. So it's up to you if you want to use those services, but I do use Credit Karma myself just to keep an eye on my credit. And it's nice. All right. So moving on, we're going to talk about insurance here, and we're hopefully we're not too much longer here. I don't have too much more, but we'll see where we're at when we get close to the break here. But life insurance, like I said, life insurance should be for the replacement of income. So if you're a worker in your household, you're working and contributing to your household, and that's what you're living on, then you should have life insurance on yourself. Especially if you have children, or if you have a spouse or other one that relies on your income for their subsistence, you want insurance. Now, there's three general categories of insurance here: term, whole life, and universal or indexed. And there's probably a few other words they're using now for these. The only one you really want to be considering, unless you're in specific circumstances, which usually is when you got lots of money, that is not really who I'm talking to today, you want term insurance. Term insurance is just what it says, for a term, for a specific period of years. If you're younger, you want that term to be like 30 to 40 years if they'll give it to you. Basically, your working lifetime, if you can, as long as you can possibly do it, especially if you're young, because the rates are lower the younger you are when you get that term policy. And you want it to be at least 10 times your annual income. If you think your income is going to increase over that time, you might even want to bump it up even higher, especially, again, if you're young, because insurance is cheaper when you're young, of course, and term insurance is the way to go. It's a lot cheaper. And you might want to even leapfrog these and have several different term policies as you get older and your income increases and you can afford the premiums better. Yeah, load another policy on top of it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Whole life is an insurance that it costs you more, but it does have some value later on. Even if you don't die, you can pull money out of it and such. Again, unless you're really wealthy, this is not a good instrument, but there are uses for it if you do have a lot of money. I'm not going to go into that here. Universal or indexed or anything else that mixes a life insurance policy with investments and other things, I was about to use some words. Stay away from these things. Don't ever, 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 not ever do these products. They are extremely complicated and they're extremely expensive. You're not going to get your money back. They'll show you all sorts of wonderful slides and things on how wonderful this is and everything. They can tell you all that stuff, but if you look at the fine print at the bottom of all these presentations that these insurance agents give you, they'll say, this is just an example. It's not, based on reality. It actually says other words. I'm just saying it's not based on reality. This is not really what's going to happen. Read the actual contract and you'll find out what the evils really are under the hood. That's what that means. So stay away from that. Term insurance only. Health insurance. Again, most people get their health insurance through their employers. That's a great way to do it. You do have healthcare.gov, which, they're fighting over that in Congress. So who knows what's going to happen with that. There are high deductible health plans out there that are attached with health savings accounts. These are wonderful because the health savings accounts is the best tax advantage savings program out there, even better than retirement accounts, where you can put money in there. You can invest that money over time. It comes out of your pay tax-free. It grows tax-free and is spent tax-free for healthcare later in life. You can save this stuff, and when you get older, when healthcare costs are generally higher, and if you save your receipts from all that time, you can even take receipts from years and years ago and put that in there and pull that money out later on down the road, and that money can grow. You saw that compounding interest thing we did, great thing to do, but it has to be tied with the high deductible healthcare program. And so you're going to have to pay out of your pocket for those healthcare things. So again, that's where, you got to plan for paying your now healthcare costs to defer using this money later. So that it gets a little complicated there, but it is a wonderful vehicle if you can do it that way. Long-term care insurance. This is a broken market. I've got some that I've had for several years, and they keep coming at me and saying, oh, we had to reevaluate everything and your premiums are going to go up to keep your same level of coverage, or you can reduce your coverage and keep your same premiums. And it's been a nightmare It's because the costs have skyrocketed and their bean counters didn't calculate it properly, and they're losing a bunch of money, and there's very few people in this market. Some people are now doing this through certain vehicles like a whole life policy that has a rider on it for long-term care insurance. So that might be an exception to the rule about whole life but you got to be real careful. You got to look at the actual insurance contract language to see if it's actually going to be a good value to you. And that you might even need a lawyer to help you with that, because these things get very complicated. But that's something, if you're long-term care insurance, if you're totally poor and desolate, you don't need it. If you're extremely wealthy and you've got money coming out your ears, you don't need it. But if you're in that in-between part where you're, that kind of that middle class, and you got a little extra money, you're living kind of comfortably, but you're not super rich, you need it, because this stuff can derail you. It gets extremely expensive if you need this later on in life. All right. So saving for retirement. Let me see, where are we at? I want to just see how many slides we've got total here. Okay, we don't have too many, so we're just going to blow through here and finish this off. Here are a few different ways of saving depending on what your employment circumstances are, your individual situation. These are the different retirement options that are out there. Employer 401k or 403b or there's some other rarer ones out there, but those are the most common ones. Many employers match a 401k to a certain amount. If you do that, you want to at least do to the match, because that's free money on the table. Whether they match dollar for dollar or some do 50% to $1 and things like that. You want that free money. That's like a free pay raise, and keep that in there. 403bs, caution on that. Many 403bs, because of where they're at, what the firm that manages them, unless you're with a preferred provider, and we'll talk about that in one of the future slides, only contribute to the match amount in your 403b. Other than that, you want to go outside and go to a Roth IRA or other investment accounts, because their management fees are just so high that many times with 403b accounts, people end up with less money in retirement than they actually put into the system. It's that bad. So be careful. You want to use, if you're 401k, many employers now offer a Roth 401k option and a traditional. You want Roth unless you're, again, extremely wealthy. Unless you're making over $400,000 a year, Roth is the way to go. If you're making $400,000 or more a year, then talk to your tax advisor. You might want to do some traditional, but that's, talk to your CPA, because you got enough money you can afford a CPA at that point. But other than that, you want the Roth, because Roth, you pay the taxes up front, but it grows tax-free and is spent tax-free in retirement. And there's a lot less little Mother May I things that work out for you later on. So a better way to do it. A Roth individual retirement account. This is an account you own that's not associated with an employer. And that's another way to save for retirement. And again, this you pay taxes on your income, but it goes into the Roth. And once it's in there, it grows tax-free and is taken out tax-free. And one of the advantages of a Roth is if some emergency comes up, you can take out your contributions tax and penalty free at any time. There's also provisions that it can be used for education and certain things. There's other ways, but a good instrument, and there are limits on how much you can put into it. And there's also income limits on if you earn so much money, that goes away, but that's only if you got super high income. And then a traditional IRA, you actually, let's see here. We got a comment here from Natasha. If you're extremely wealthy, then you should totally share the wealth and donate here. Okay, AI. Oh, that was funny. We need a little comic relief there, though. Traditional IRA, that's where you actually get an upfront tax advantage right now. And then later on, there's other things that go on with it. It grows, but you got to pay taxes on it when you take it out of your thing. So you're paying future taxes on it of what you put in it and how it grow, the additional growth that it has. So that's why I'm leaning towards the Roth here. And if you're self-employed, you've got a couple options. You've got a solo 401k, and many of those even have Roth options now. That's only if you are a single employee, like you just work for yourself. You have no other employees in your business. There's also a simplified employee pension that self-employed individuals can use to put money away, and they can put a lot of money away there. It's very flexible. All right. Again, another proverb here, 28:20. A faithful man will abound with blessings, but whoever hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. Yes, this one here. And this is one that you want to do. Let me just get into, this is what I want to just hammer home. It's time in the market, not timing the market. That's one of the phrases you'll hear from investment advisors. And that's because, hey, we're, a lot of people want to get rich quick, and you can, there are people that are what's called day traders, and they can make money at it. It takes a certain kind of person to do that. And you got to really know what you're doing to be successful in that environment, because the reward is tremendous. I mean, it is a tremendous reward, but the risks are also very, very high. It's kind of like, we talked about addictions earlier, gambling. It's really kind of gets to that way. When you're a day trader, you're really a gambler. And that's what we're talking about. Whereas if you're a traditional just investor, you put the money in there and you let it sit there and grow, and let the businesses, over time, provide you that income back. That's the way I do it. I don't do this short-term investing stuff, because that can be very dangerous. I mean, there's people that do it, and there's people that are successful at doing it, but you gotta have very, very strong discipline to be successful in that. And you gotta know what you're doing. All right. So here we go. I'm going to bot myself out here so we can see this investment advice. All right. Where you have your money matters. The investment firm matters. And here's why. There's planned fees with any kind of investment you have. Sometimes there's individual fees for individual investments. Sometimes firms charge you a fee to manage your investments and things like that. So you need to be aware of what those fees are, because those can be significant. Like I said, some 403Bs are so bad in their fees that you end up losing money over time. And we don't want that for you. And like I said, some of them are plan fees, some of them are individual fees. Here's my recommendations. These are the three investment firms that I would recommend that you look at first. These are all discount brokers, and they're good brokers. And I've got a fourth here that generally only applies to people with 403Bs, but you got Vanguard, Fidelity, and Schwab. Those are the ones that I would recommend for you. If you're just starting in investing, I would lean you towards Fidelity. They're geared towards initial investors, and they've got some very low cost funds and such. Vanguard is a discount broker, and they're a mutual fund broker kind of thing. You are kind of an owner in the Vanguard system. Vanguard's not bad. They're good. I've actually got a son-in-law that works for them, and I used to have a lot of investments with them. I'm currently with Fidelity because I had a company that had some stuff there, and I've moved there. But they're good. Their customer service has been a little touchy over the last few years because they've grown a little bit too fast. But I think they're getting things back on. And Schwab is good. They're a good stable firm. TIAA CREF, they do have some good 403B programs. Also, I believe Fidelity has some 403Bs out there. I don't know if Vanguard does now, but if you're lucky enough to have those, feel free to put in whatever you need to in those plans. You're good to go, generally speaking. And we talked about timing the market versus timing the market. We already covered that one. And the easy button. Many of these investment firms have what's called targeted retirement funds. These are funds like you figure, okay, I'm going to work until I'm X amount years old. That year is going to be 2035 or 2050 or whatever. And they'll have funds that are targeted for that. They automatically adjust and rebalance based on how close you're getting to your retirement. They adjust the investment mix and the risks and things like that. And they keep adjusting them every quarter until you actually retire. And once you retire, you probably want to change those into some other instruments. They don't do as well once you actually are in retirement where you're taking money out. You might want to change them into other investment things, but that's for later on. And if you're not familiar with investing and you're like, I don't understand any of this stuff, I do recommend Investopedia. They're out there and they've got good resources that will teach you a little bit about how the stock market works and all this and give you some basics on investing. You really don't need an investment advisor as you're starting off and accumulating. But when you get into retirement, I learned this. As I retired, I was glad I had some financial advisors because the stage changes when you start taking money out and things like that. And there's a few nuances there that I was glad I had some people to help me and work through those things. Now, generally speaking, they do charge fees depending on what they're doing for you. But you don't want those fees to be more than 1% of your portfolio. That's kind of the accepted thing. And you want them to be a fiduciary. You want them to be a fiduciary. This is important because if they sign an actual fiduciary agreement, that means that they're putting your interest first and they're not getting commissions and things like that because they can legally, if they're not a fiduciary and they haven't signed a fiduciary agreement, they can give you what's called suitable investments. And they can get massive commissions on these things and they can hurt you. So be careful in getting investment advice. Make sure you've got a fiduciary, and there's different places you can do those. If you need more information on that, you can pop me some emails and I can help you with that, either at admin at We Who Are Lost or at joe@theroadtoconcord.com. Either one of those will get to me and I can help you out with that. Buying a home, like I said, that's something that, many people want to do. And I'm just going to quickly go over some points on this. You want to use a real estate broker, especially if you're going to first-time home buyer. Yeah, you're going to want them because they can walk you through things and help you through what you're doing. Try to work with a broker if you can, not just a real estate agent, or broker, because a broker is one that actually supervises other realtors and they've been in the business longer and they know the ins and outs and they'll give you better service. If at all possible, try to get into a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year. I've got a little chart up here that shows the savings that you will get. So much better if you can do that. Especially with the interest rates as they are now, because they're up in the 6 and possibly even 7s now. So it's really really harder to get into a home now. But those market conditions change and things like that. You want to have at least 20% down, generally speaking. That's what they're going to require for a traditional loan. If you don't have that 20%, they have what's called basically it's a mortgage insurance that you have to pay, and that can get extremely expensive. So you want that 20% down. So you got to plan on saving that up. You don't want any new credit 6 months prior to taking out a mortgage, if at all possible, because that can affect the people that are determining if you're a good credit risk and things like that, that can affect that and make it more difficult for you to get a good mortgage, and can affect your mortgage rate as well. Be prepared to hold the home for at least 7 to 10 years, depending on market conditions. That's how long you need to hold a home in order to recoup the costs of, the closing costs that you have in buying and selling a home. To recoup those, you generally have to keep a home for 7 to 10 years in order to kind of not be upside down in your home, like we talked about with the auto. And estate planning. This is something, some people need to do a lot of this stuff. Some people may not need to do as much of it. It depends on your actual situation. We talked about life insurance before. I'm just briefly going to mention that again. That's if you've got children, especially, you want life insurance to make sure that your replacement of income is there to take care of the family needs while you're, when you're gone, and that kind of thing. A will, essential, especially again if you have children, because if you don't have a will, the state is going to determine where your children go and who they go to. So you need to make sure you've got a will in place. And if your situation's fairly simple, there's places you can even go out online and create a will and such, for very little cost. And wills, a real simple will are not that expensive either, even if you go to a lawyer. Some of them, if you have assets in special circumstances, they can get even more expensive depending, but that's things you got to look at. Trust. There's testamentary trust. That's one that actually activates upon your death. And there's a revocable trust that you actually put assets into while you're still living, and it actually activates basically upon your death. And it says it's revocable. That means that you can change it while you're still alive. And that's usually when you've got significant assets and special circumstances or certain, things that make things complicated if you were to die, like disinheriting people or, children and things like that, or other special circumstances. And usually this is if you've got significant assets, say, if you got like $1 million or more in assets or so, you probably want to look at this idea. Medical advance directives. This is, hey, I don't like the idea of being on life support and things like that. You can make those decisions ahead of time so that stuff doesn't happen to you, and it makes it easier for your loved ones to make decisions regarding your medical care. And that's the second thing, is medical power of attorney. You should have people pre-designated to make those medical decisions for you if you were unconscious or not able to make those decisions for yourself. And there's other powers of attorney that you may need to make if you have special circumstances. These are all things that, make things easier for those if you're unable to make decisions for yourself, or unfortunately, if you pass away. These things are helping out those that are left behind. And that ends it for today. And I know we went very long today. I appreciate all of you that did stick around with me for this whole course. I hope that it is helpful to you. And again, if you have more questions, I'm not a financial advisor. Okay. But admin at We Who Are Lost or Joe at theroadtoconcord.com, either one will get to me. And, I say I'm not a financial advisor, but I've been fairly good with finances over the years, and I know a little bit here and there. And I do have access to financial advisors. Like I said, my son-in-law is a financial advisor for Vanguard, so I do have resources I can pull from. If you have a specific situation, I can do what I can, help you with. Be glad to do that, or I can refer you to other resources that may help you that are not within my ability. I've been fortunate. Yahweh's blessed us, and I was able to retire around the age of 62, and we're doing pretty well. And it allows me to do this for you guys. And so glad to do it. All right. So, yes, Natasha.
Quick question. Will this PDF be available to download?
Yeah, I'll get it. It's going to take it a little bit because this was kind of a spur of the moment thing. So we're going to have to go through and do some post-production things here. What's going to
Right.
happen is after the show, we're going to go and change, like the title of the show is incorrect and the description and stuff like that. We're going to have to go in and fix all that. I'll have to get with Joe and get him a PDF of the slide deck to put up on the website and such. So give us a little bit of time to work through this, because this was a kind of a spur of the moment thing, because Joe got called away unexpectedly, but we will get those out to you so that you have those things available to you.
All right.
But anyway, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate everyone that helps to support this show, whether it's financially or just hitting the like buttons and the bells and all those things that help promote the show online so that people can find us and hopefully get some benefit from what we're doing for you here. Tomorrow, we're back in Genesis. You're going to definitely want to be here for that if you're interested in that stuff. Wednesday, I don't know what, I think I don't know what Joe's going to do on Wednesday, because he's working on something for our congregation for next Shabbat that he might, I don't know. He's working at, he might actually do a presentation. I don't know if he'll do it this week or next week, but he's got a special show that'll be coming up. Or we may be going into, I think Jeremiah was the next one he wanted to cover in the prophets, but we'll see what he does there. Thursday, we've got our book study, Bible Amongst the Myths. And on Friday, we've got our book study on the Judas Scepter and Joseph's Birthright. So that's what we've got on our program for the rest of the week. And at some point, I will have a, thank you, Deltros. He says, this was greatly informative. Thank you. All right. Appreciate that. I do have, I'm working on a class for introduction to biblical Hebrew. And that'll be coming up, but I don't know when. Like I said, I was going to do this show on Friday, so I'll see where we're at. And I was planning on doing that one when I return. I'm going to be going on vacation around the beginning of March and probably doing that afterwards. And then we may have a few other shows for you, but that's what we got. And appreciate, like I said, I appreciate everybody being here and appreciate you putting up with me today with Joe, and keep Joe and Chief, the old dog, in your thoughts and prayers there. I'm glad that he's doing okay, but Joe should be back hopefully tomorrow, and we'll be back on schedule. With that, I'll just say goodbye and turn it over to Natasha to take us out. See you tomorrow.